The Zephyrus G14 is a great little gaming laptop, but for the most part it's still pretty pricey. Well, that's exactly why the TUF A14 exists. It's literally just a budget G14. And this year it got a pretty huge upgrade, with it now having the fastest integrated GPU on any laptop. So should you save some money and get the TUF A14, or should you spend a little more and get the Zephyrus G14? Well, let's find out. And please like and subscribe if you like these type of videos. From the outside, these two are quite different. The TUF has a pretty professional look to it, with it being all grey with minimal branding. But the Zephyrus has this LED strip on the back, although this can be turned off and it'll just look like a slightly thicker MacBook. The TUF has a metal top, but the rest of the body is made of plastic, although it doesn't necessarily feel cheap, and it is still quite sturdy. But the Zephyrus is just on a whole nother level, having a fully aluminum body from top to bottom. The G14 is technically a little heavier than the A14, but the difference is basically negligible. They're both very lightweight. But the TUF is definitely a little thicker, although it's still a lot thinner than any other gaming laptop. On the inside, they do work a little differently. The Zephyrus just has a separate CPU and GPU, but the TUF has a very fast APU, which means no dedicated graphics. And that means it needs a lot less power to perform almost the same. And less power means less heat. And it also has shared memory between its CPU and iGPU, which means you can actually choose how much memory goes to the graphics card. And that gives it way more versatility when it comes to VRAM intensive tasks. For their port selections, they're actually almost identical, save for some different USB versions. And while they also have the same wattage power bricks, the one on the Zephyrus G14 is actually a little larger. Not by a noticeable amount or anything, but I did think this was interesting. They both support USB-C charging up to 100 watts though, so you could always use a smaller charger on the side. Now let's look at their keyboards. They both have a backlight, which is handy, but the TUF only has a white color, while the Zephyrus has a single zone RGB backlight. But the lighting on the TUF gets a whole lot brighter. Not that you'd ever need something this bright, but still. Now here's how their keys compare. These are both great to type on. The TUF has a little longer key travel and sounds and feels a bit thumpier, while the Zephyrus is a little bit clickier. I think I prefer the TUF slightly, but this kind of stuff is really up to taste. Moving down, we have their trackpads. They're about the same size, which means they're both quite big. They are both made of glass. And I actually think these are the exact same trackpads. So their clicks are also about the same. Moving up, we have their displays. And this is really where the main differences start to show up. The TUF does have a pretty good IPS panel, but it is nothing compared to the OLED on the Zephyrus. OLED just has way more vibrant colors, infinite contrast, and when we compare their blacks, it just doesn't even come close. The Zephyrus's panel also gets a little brighter, but with the infinite contrast of OLED, it looks a whole lot brighter. And overall, OLED is in almost every way just superior. The TUF's display does have a higher refresh rate, but the faster response times of OLEDs actually means the G14 might feel slightly smoother in a way. Their coatings are different as well. The TUF has a matte display, while the Zephyrus is glossy, but with a very good anti-reflective layer. This fully comes down to preference, but I prefer the G14 here. I just don't like the glare that matte coatings have that much, and glossy just looks a bit crispier. I do think the hinge is actually a little better on the TUF though. It opens up further and it just feels more sturdy, while the Zephyrus can wobble around a bit. They can both be opened up easily with one hand though. Most of these points are tiny differences, but overall the Zephyrus G14 definitely has the superior display. Now, when it comes to speakers, this usually isn't the strong point of any Windows laptop. But the Zephyrus G14 and G16 have changed that since 2024. So how does the TUF hold up? Well, the Zephyrus still sounds leagues better. The TUF absolutely has some pretty good speakers. I mean, it beats most Windows laptops. But the Zephyrus just gets a lot louder, it has significantly more and better sounding bass, and it just has more clarity and surround sound, which actually works. It has 2 speakers at the top here and some dedicated subwoofers on the bottom. While the TUF only has speakers on the bottom, so it just sounds a bit muffled in comparison. They do both have some pretty good speakers, but I know which one I would choose for playing music or games. Their webcams are very similar, but they have a little different processing. The microphone is a whole lot better on the Zephyrus though. Which one do you prefer? But I know what you're all waiting for: performance. The TUF A14 might have the fastest iGPU in the world, but is that enough to beat an RTX 5060? Well, in Cinebench R23, the TUF A14 absolutely crushes the refreshed Ryzen 9 in the Zephyrus G14. In both single and especially multi-core performance, it is a couple generations faster, and that does make a difference. But in 3D Mark TimeSpy, it's actually really close. Within margin of error, the Ryzen 392's iGPU is basically as fast as an RTX 5060. But we haven't even talked about the TUF A14's secret weapon, that shared memory. With it being able to allocate up to 24 GB just to its GPU, it has the same amount of VRAM as an RTX 5090. And with that much VRAM, it does a lot better in VRAM-intensive tasks, like running local AI models. It can run way bigger models, and it just gives responses faster in smaller models as well. So if you work with big 3D modeling projects or do local AI stuff, the choice is pretty obvious. But these are just synthetic benchmarks, which don't always show real-world performance. And these are gaming laptops, so let's see how they compare in some actual games.
What did you do, man? No!
Alrighty, so performance in games really varies per title. These two do have slightly different resolutions, but the performance impact shouldn't be huge. And we actually saw a very clear trend. The TUF A14 was a lot faster in GPU-intensive games, while the Zephyrus G14 was a lot faster in CPU-intensive games. But that doesn't really make sense, does it? Because in the benchmarks, the TUF A14 had the way faster CPU. Well, I think that while gaming, it's giving more power to its integrated GPU than to its processor. But that does mean that the TUF A14's integrated GPU is quite a bit faster than an RTX 5060, because in GPU-intensive games, it was considerably faster. So bottom line, the TUF A14 is better for GPU-intensive games, CPU-intensive applications, and anything that requires a huge amount of VRAM. So for the most part, it is the faster laptop here. But what about temperatures and fan noise? Does having both the CPU and GPU on one chip mean that it needs to be cooled less? Well, yes, that is exactly the case. Since both the CPU and GPU are on a single die and they use a lot less power, it is a lot easier to cool. Meanwhile, this version of the G14 gets pretty toasty when it comes to its CPU. And its GPU straight up reaches its thermal limit, so it is being pushed to its limits. But maybe it just stays cooler because its fans are running faster? Well, again, no. The TUF A14 stays a whole lot quieter while gaming. That single chip uses less power and is easier to cool, which means it produces less heat and it requires less fan noise to be kept cool. Alright, great. So less power usage should mean better battery life, right? Well, I compared their battery life in two different scenarios, under light use and during gaming. In the light use test, I played a YouTube video until both their batteries died, with their displays at 80% brightness, at 60 Hz, and running off of their integrated GPUs. And the G14 actually lasted quite a bit longer. In my dedicated review of the TUF A14, I did say that this short battery life was likely a firmware issue, because the ProArt PX13, which has almost the same chip as this, got like double the battery life. But I just retested it and it stayed exactly the same, so I don't really know what this could be. In actual real-world use, these numbers are gonna be lower, so it's a real bummer that Asus hasn't managed to fix this yet. Now, in the gaming test, I played Battlefield 1 until their batteries died, with the same settings as before. And again, the TUF A14 should last a lot longer, just like the ProArt PX13. Honestly, this could just be an issue with my unit specifically, but I could not get it to last any longer. So at least in my testing, the Zephyrus G14 has the superior battery life. But what about upgradeability? These are both thin and light gaming laptops, so is there any space left inside for modular components? Well, the A14 is actually more upgradable than the Zephyrus. They do both unfortunately have soldered RAM, so you can't upgrade their memory, but the G14 only has one M.2 SSD slot, while the A14 actually has two, which is pretty rare for a 14-inch gaming laptop. They both have a Wi-Fi card slot though, which could be handy in the future. But here's where it gets interesting: pricing. This Zephyrus G14 with an RTX 5060 is around 1,800 to 2,000 euros in Europe. So it's not exactly cheap. But the TUF A14 with 64 GB of shared memory is quite a bit more affordable. But there's also a regular model of the TUF A14 with just a dedicated GPU, an RTX 5060. And that one is one of the cheapest gaming laptops you can buy over here, at like half the price. In the US, you can find the Zephyrus for way cheaper though, and it actually has really good value over there. But I couldn't even find the Ryzen MAX version of the TUF in stores in America. Except for this one Amazon listing, but it's way more expensive. In general, this Ryzen MAX model of the TUF A14 is pretty hard to find across the world. I mean, I've only found it for sale in like Spain. But let's get to a conclusion here. Which one of these is more worth it? The TUF A14 or the Zephyrus G14? Well, it really depends on where you live and what exactly you're gonna do with your laptop. The TUF A14 is, from the outside at least, literally just a budget Zephyrus G14. The G14 has a better, more sturdy all-aluminum body, it has a way prettier OLED display, it has far superior speakers, and overall it just feels a bit more premium. The Ryzen MAX 392 is an extraordinarily fast chip though. And paired with that shared memory, you can do some crazy stuff if you need lots of VRAM. But that is about the only scenario where it beats the Zephyrus G14, in big 3D modeling projects or for running local AIs. Yes, it is faster than the RTX 5060 Zephyrus in most GPU-intensive games. But there are also higher spec models of the Zephyrus G14, up to an RTX 5080, and those will be faster. But they'll also be more expensive. Look, here's my advice. If you're looking to save some money, get neither one of these. Get the TUF A14 with an RTX 5060, because it is infinitely cheaper than either one of these. If you want a better display, better build quality, and a faster GPU for more money, get the Zephyrus G14. And if you need lots of VRAM, get the TUF A14 with that Ryzen MAX chip. I mean, it really is a one-of-a-kind product. The Zephyrus G14 is the superior device in most ways, but is that worth the price increase? That's for you to decide. Either way, if you're gonna buy either one of these, you're not gonna be disappointed. Now let me give a huge shout out to my YouTube members. Soundwife, Thomas, Inky, Mr. Frosty Dude, Dropzone1, Aki, Mr. Nuke, Sebastian, Christian Sands, Real Elf, Eric the Red, Ghost Data, Walter, Abdullah, Lewis, and Vice. If you become a YouTube member, you get early access to content of mine, a shout out at the end of every video, and you'll also be supporting me as a creator to make these videos. And of course, you'll also be part of the Cool Guys Club, so you can use cool emojis like these in the comment section. So join the club if you're interested. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye bye.